What's up, everybody? I hope you're all doing very well. I'm super excited to share another podcast with you. This one is with Dr. Richard Waterloo, who is writing a book on reality tunnels. There's a lot of different terms for this: reality bubbles, reality sphere, layer, reality layer, what have you. But we go into pretty good detail, and I also have a link to a paper that Mr. Dr. Waterloo wrote for Robert Anton Wilson, 23, July 23rd. I'll have that link. And I just wanted to say this is a really good sounding episode. I was able to edit it and make it sound really clean and clear. And a big reason that I was able to do that is because of all the fine, amazing, wonderful people who are willing to donate to me on Patreon. So I wanted to take a second and shout out to all of you, all 23 of you, oddly enough: Emily, Bolton, Brittany, Abby, Anna, Scott, Allison, Stephanie, Taylor, Carrie, Carol, Stacy, John, Richard, Mark, Lorraine, Alexandra, Charlie, Lindsay, Imagination, Adam, Yuri, and Know the Moon. I really appreciate every single one of y'all. You make it possible, and I just wanted to say thank you and say your names really fast, like an auctioneer. Sorry about that. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Project Mindfuck with Dr. Richard Waterloo. I'm really excited to have Rich on the show. We are Twitter buddies, and a lot of you probably aren't on Twitter. Can't blame you there, but it's a fun place to try out bad jokes and also stumble across brilliant minds like Rich. Rich, welcome to the show.
Hey there.
Mr. Dr. Richard Waterloo, tell us a little bit about your doctor status.
It's a name, just like any other, like Dr. Dre, Dr. Seuss. It's fun.
I love it. Well, I got to say that you're mentally definitely on a doctor status, as far as I'm concerned. Mr. Dr. Richard Waterloo sent me over a paper that he has written for Raw Day 2020. Which, if you guys don't know, Robert Anton Wilson, he was a intellectual giant to a lot of us. He's one of my favorite philosophers ever of all time, and I assume maybe one of yours as well, Rich. But he had written a paper, and we're gonna go through a little bit of some of the stuff that he talks about in this paper about reality tunnels and just how we are experiencing reality, what the truth of that is. And it was a very, very, very well written paper. Aren't you working on a book as well?
I am, along the same, using the same type of information.
This is going to be epic. I'm so excited about this and talking about it because a lot of people don't know much about Robert Anton Wilson, even though he has contributed so much to, I guess, Western thought, magical thought, New Age thought, like all of that. And I think he has a more coherent take on it than most than most of the stuff that we hear that's really popular and in the mainstream. But that is coming out, or that has come out. 7/23 is Raw Day 2020, and I'll have a link to the paper down below. We're going to talk about some of these concepts, and we're very fortunate to be able to do that with Rich. And but I want you guys to all go and check that out. And so tell us a little bit about the book that you're working on, if you don't mind, Rich.
I started about 3 years ago, just working with philosophy, general philosophy, Western thought, Marcus Aurelius, stuff like that, and that kind of spun me out into a few further-reaching philosophies. And back 2.5 years ago, I stumbled on Prometheus Rising. It was recommended to me by a friend, and I got sucked in, and I had quite an existential crisis that lasted for about 6 months. But it was being in Chapel Perilous and not knowing what anything was, and so that further sparked my curiosity and led me down paths of postmodern thought and critical theory, simulation theory, physics, and every nook and cranny I could find that was nuance. It interests me. So I started writing down as much as I could about it every day, and then it formed into sort of a philosophy. It started originally as a book of how to survive, how to be within a simulation. I described reality as a simulation, but and like in how to work within it, like in an all-encompassing field guide to being. That was just way too much, so I pared it down to just one idea that I really enjoyed, and that was Robert Anton Wilson's reality tunnels. And so I took his idea, and then along my paths of exploration, I went out and found things that fit into this thing that I was making, this reality tunnel, which it's meta in itself, because I'm creating a reality tunnel that is the basis for creating other reality tunnels, and it's just, it's a thought loop, right? So playing in that realm, I was able to create this reality tunnel idea, or build upon it, right? I didn't create it. And get it to a point where it kind of makes sense, because when you're out there in lofty philosophy space, or especially in in meditation space, or psychedelic space, it's hard to bring back all that information. And you know that when you do bring it back, you're going to order it in a certain way, and it's not going to be the thing that you experienced. And so you kind of have, well, I thought that the only way to get some of this information into reality is to convert it into words, and which somewhat destroys it, but it allows people to get an idea of kind of what a reality tunnel is. And then in this paper that I wrote, I made it very pop culture, and kind of I talked about the ways we can deal with reality on an individual basis that kind of serves our purpose, or your purpose.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job of just being, really concise, and you explained things in a way that was easy to understand, and also coming to some really good points. Like, here's how we can implement this, which is great. Like a little call to action in there. And the reason why words aren't the best way to communicate this idea is because that is part of the reality tunnel itself, right? So we definitely should talk about reality tunnels and what they're comprised of. I thought you did an awesome job with this, from the fundamental aspect all the way up. And a lot of people have other words for these. Perception, your paradigm, your worldview, these type of maps, models, how we view the world. That's what we're talking about here when we're talking about a reality tunnel. So in transurfing, for instance, Vadim talks about slides. That is sort of synonymous with how you view the world. It has a lot to do with that, as well as creating different slides. But with Robert Anton Wilson's work and Dr. Waterloo's, then we're going to go even more into detail about how these are formed, and really kind of take a step back and see it from that meta perspective, and really understand how what a really powerful insight this is, because it's really where all your power, we really are just fucking attention, right? Like, I mean, and if we could use that attention to better ourselves, then that's exactly what we would do. But if we use our attention to shoot ourselves in the foot or sabotage ourselves as individuals, as well as on a large scale, then that's exactly what's going to happen as well. It's a mere cause and effect relationship. But so I guess Chapel Perilous would be, you've referenced that would be on the edge of the precipice of like worldview. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for me, Chapel Perilous is maybe not understanding. At first, it's not understanding; it's confusion. But it's having a grounding in not knowing, right? That incorrigible agnosticism that he talks about. It's being in a place where nothing is completely what you believe it to be, and even that belief is not an objective belief as well.
Yeah, everything is created by our minds to create this map, this model of the world. So from your angle, do you even believe in any form of objective sort of reality or world?
Um, I I got two answers. One is the idealist version, and that's we can't know. I mean, it's so far out. There's so much more information that we don't have access to. And, give it 1,000 years, we'll have a lot more information proving our current theories about everything wrong. So, and then 10,000 years from that, we'll have something else. So I think it's an ongoing process. I see belief as something that works for right now. So when you say, do I believe in it, I don't know what that is. It seems like everything's believed. Um, so my first answer is that I don't know. And the second one is, well, we got to talk about something. We're here. We're in a material reality where we can only express and um, communicate with each other using this vehicle, this substrate of language and expression. So, do I believe in some things? Yeah, I think adopting beliefs is a healthy habit as opposed to accepting beliefs, where you really think about the beliefs that you want to have about the world. If you get off in an existential area of doubt and like a crisis, then it's important to have a belief that everything will be okay, whether it will or it won't. So that there's a belief that I have installed that I used to be very suicidal due to some mental illness, and I had to install the belief that if I when I die, and the reality will continue, and so it's adopting beliefs for me because I feel like I'm pretty far gone, um, because of Robert Anton Wilson's work in part. So I like to, and adopting beliefs gives you a lot more leverage and ability to create your own realities, create your own languages and relationships, and then nurture those within your abilities. And you can create new skills and stuff like that. So that's my long-winded answer.
No, that's a great answer. I love that. And yeah, belief is kind of a tricky word. All words are tricky when you start messing with Robert Anton Wilson because, you know, he really talked a lot about like, maybe logic as well as comparing things, saying that I prefer this to this instead of this is better than this, and these determinate answers because it allows us to step back and, like you're saying, we adopt or we choose our own beliefs, and that's okay, right?
Yeah, and it seems like we have those beliefs. Some beliefs came from somewhere, and we're doing all right with those. I mean, my litmus test for whether something works or not is, are we still here? So that's, I mean,
We haven't blown ourselves to smithereens yet.
monarchies worked for thousands of years. Primitive cultures worked at a time. I like to adopt systems like the general systems theory as kind of a guiding point for determining whether something works or not. An idea works. Like so, reading postmodern philosophy for a month, I was like, this is an amazing perspective, but it doesn't work because you're not going to convince the majority or enough people to get on board with it. Whether it can be any group think. People are so stuck in whatever their belief is now that they can't see outside of it. So, does it work? Yeah, I'm sure postmodern thought works in Star Trek world, and American capitalism works right now apparently. So we haven't blown ourselves up.
That's actually kind of amazing, you know. I mean, damn, dude. I'm actually quite shocked that hasn't happened yet.
Given I've watched people shove all kinds of things into their mouths, and it's completely unhealthy, and they just stick around. I have family members who are being held up by pills and just being kept alive. Their heart keeps beating because of these these devices that get put in there. Resilient resilient creatures.
Yeah, man, I'm continuously perplexed. The more I think about it, the, the crazier it is. But I'm really excited, man. I'm excited to really share some of these ideas, and you've really done a lot of really cool research, and you've done a really good job of putting these ideas down. And so a lot of this stuff, it comes really from Timothy Leary, right? Like he's kind of the father of a lot of the views that Robert Anton Wilson basically took and ran with, right?
Yeah, he put out the idea of the reality tunnel idea, and then Robert Anton Wilson made it a little bit more succinct. Or he called it a neurological reality tunnel, which I think now resonates with a lot of people in, which can resonate with a lot of people in neurology and future thinking and stuff like that. We're learning about how, I mean, we are, our DNA and our connectome are all information, either storage centers or places where we can get information. I mean, the firing of neurons being somewhat binary, whether they're on or off. That's it adds a lot to the idea of neurological reality tunnels. Adds a lot to what we can work with now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and starting from the first sort of aspect of it, because you have broken it down into sort of four different things that kind of make up that do make up our reality tunnel. Starting with the fundamental idea that basically, and this is kind of spoiler alert if you haven't read Prometheus Rising yet. You should still anyway. But, conclusion is sort of like information is sort of God, kind of. Like that's really simplifying it, but that's kind of the idea, right? Like information is what makes up our reality, kind of, right? That's to skip ahead all the way through the 8-circuit model of consciousness and all the great exercises in that book and kind of get to, sort of information is God, right? Like that's kind of what the book says. And that makes sense. I mean, that fits within the world that we live in. Everything is sort of reflecting itself and each other. It's all fractalized and all that, even beginning, from the beginning of this conversation where you're talking about building the reality tunnel, from this sort of meta place. So understanding that and sort of acknowledging that and that our bodies are basically taking in all that information, and our nervous system and our heart and our conscious mind have all the stimulus that our bodies are basically interpreting, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, that's the way I perceive it, and that's instead of thinking of it as an objective reality, you can consider yourself a biocomputer, and that's a human biocomputer, which is a term that I took from John Lilly, and it's the perception that it's the understanding that everything that you experience is information and you are processing it. So when you're seeing something, you're bringing in so many amount of reds and yellows, and we can determine how many reds and yellows that you brought in. But and from when you hear things, you're bringing in information. When you feel things, so it's from those 5 senses that you receive all the information that you have about reality. But you wanted to get back to the you want to work from the top down.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
All right, so understanding that you may be a human biocomputer processing information, then we can't really think about an objective reality, but we know that something's out there. I know that when Owen is having a thought, I can rest assured that he is having a thought, but it's not the same thought that I have. So there's information beyond what I know and can experience. And then this also applies to the knowns, the things that we know about the world. Like I just said, in 1,000 years, we'll have a different theory that will make our current theories ridiculous. And I just think it's a general process. I don't think that there's no end to that in my thinking. That's why I like to think, though. Keeps kind of hope alive. Hey, we're not gonna reach the end. It's all about the journey. Because if we reach the end, then what? So
we've blown ourselves up.
Yeah, here we go. So if we're human biocomputers, then and we can understand that there's information out there, that we can put that in one bucket, or like in one filter of reality. In the way that I say that all things that I have not experienced and I do not know are available within reality, meaning that they are information. And so the analogy that I like to use is simulation theory, where if we're in a computer, and that doesn't matter if we are in a computer or not, but I think the best way to understand this concept is through a simulation theory filter. So let's say we're inside of a computer program right now, and and all of the information that has been processed by the human biocomputers is available there too, right? And so that opens up the door to all of those psychedelic states, or Jung's his unconscious, whatever his
Collective unconscious.
What was that again?
Collective
Yes.
conscious, collective unconscious.
Yeah, so we have that as a theory, and then L. Ron Hubbard also believed that we're we record information, so you can put memory out there as well, but that would be memory is brought from the information that you receive within the reality. So in that first layer of reality, you have all of information, and you can have access to some of it, and you can have access to mostly none of it. You cannot have access to most of it. I don't get to look at the thoughts inside your head, and I can't remember the memories of somebody I've never met. So that's the first level. The second level is our immediate perception, and that's all of the information that we receive from our senses. And that one's pretty straightforward. But it's one step below. It's the first set of information that we receive in reality. So when we come out as a baby, we don't have language. We don't have the stories of who we are. There's no identity. There's just experience. The same with 5 Dried Grams in Silent Darkness. It's that noetic experience where it's beyond words. Well, when you saw your children being born, you have children, right, Owen?
I don't.
Oh, so if that type of experience, when you go to the Grand Canyon and you look at it and you go, I can't write back. This is too amazing. Things that can't be put in words. That is the next level of perception. I'm sorry, the next level of this reality tunnel. That information comes in. So if you have one large set of information in layer 1, you take out a piece of that, and that piece of information that you take out of is your sensory experience. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. So we have this sensory experience, and then we need to do something with it. So we start calling it things. We use language to determine what things are and what things aren't, especially in our Western Aristotelian language, where there's very little nuance. I'm using a computer and not a couch. It's pretty obvious. So things are and things are not. And we divide up reality into what things are. And using our language, we create a filter we use to understand our world. And then from language, that third layer, which is language, we pull from it the connections in between things. So it's the stories that we tell, and it's the narratives that connect us with our known reality. Even though all of this known reality that you are part of is just within your recorded perception since you were born. Yeah, that's what I got for the 4 layers. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's very apt. I really, really like how you broke all this down too, because, here we are, we're in this world of information. We have access to some of it. Most of it that we are accessing through our 5 senses, direct experience, which is really a lot of the experiences that we have truly are beyond words, especially if we start talking about internal experiences, which are, something that we can measure inside ourselves. Then we try to call it things. We use a filter. We use a language to try and communicate these ideas and concepts to people. And then we also have this overarching story that we tell ourselves, and that's important too. It seems like we can choose any of these. We can choose any story that we want. Do you go with that?
I do like that. I use it in my own personal. I use it in the float tank as a technique. I float almost every other week, except for this pandemic issue. But I was in there, and I was able to take my personality and kind of project it into the float tank while I was in my unconscious, and using some techniques from John Lilly, I projected things that I knew about myself, the identity that I believed in. And I said, you know what? I don't like this one because it doesn't push for positivity. So I'm going to alter it a little bit, and and then from that deep unconscious level came forth conscious ways of carrying out that programming. So yeah, you can pick and we're seeing that here on the internet too. You see it with folks like Dr. Richard Waterloo, and you see people just create their own identities
Mm-hmm.
and their own narratives. And I think that because it's being done right now, you're almost called to do it as a type of response. Because you don't, if you let somebody program your narrative and story, and it's not where you want to go, it's not within your deep intention, then you're stuck, and you're stuck in whatever reality tunnel programmed you.
That's really good. That's really good. And I think it's really important too to think about this in a way that like many people could have many different stories that they tell themselves, many different reality tunnels, and that has nothing not necessarily not anything to do with you, right? Like you and I could have completely different perceptions and completely different reality tunnels, perspectives on how things work, different stories that we tell ourselves about the world, as well as on an individual level, and there's no problem there. I mean, no, I mean I know that might seem like really simple, but there's just so much strife going on. There's a lot of yelling, and I hate it, man. It drives me nuts to endure so much like conflict because I just don't really enjoy it. Like, it's like a little bit. I'm a little sensitive to it, I guess, but that's just like an important thing because right. It's really easy to divide people, especially right now. There's just a lot of hot button topics, so I just want to make it clear that it's completely okay that somebody sees the world a certain way that doesn't necessarily coincide with the way that you see the world, right? Like as us as individuals, and maybe need to remind myself of this too, because I have the sort of I guess I would say like I'm trying to help people understand things about the world. Like I want to go out and try to help people open up their minds as much as possible, and see the positive parts of life. Although with all the conflict, sometimes it's hard to stay focused on that. But just understanding that this person's allowed to have their narrative, and if they want to think that certain events need to happen in a certain order, or that we're in a certain time in the world, or they believe in a certain God or not, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. That doesn't mean that you need to shift your perspective, and it doesn't mean that they need to shift their perspective. Maybe we could talk a little bit about language. I think that might be be good, because if we're trying to share these experiences with each other, it can get very confusing, and a lot of fights could break out as a result of that.
Yeah, I think one of the important grounding points, tying in what you just said into this next part, one of the important grounding points that we can play with is that we're all here in physical reality. And so we can have all these different thoughts. You can believe in Q, and you can believe in NPR, or whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, what are you doing? And I think that's an important uh, distinction to have, because we can pick apart all types of reality in our heads and write things down. But then what is actually going on? And I think with what we're looking at in this, what I call the consensus reality, in some of those reality tunnels, that you have people that are acting based on information. And I think there needs to be, no, I don't think there needs to be, but I think it might be wise to consider what you do before, think before you act.
Yeah, I saw one of your tweets. I think last week was something like, it was like, I know so much about people I've never met or encountered, or something like that. I can't remember the exact wording of it.
I have so many well constructed opinions about events that I've never witnessed and people I've never met.
It's so good. And we're all guilty of it. I think, like, take a minute and laugh, because, like, how many times have we gone through a quote unquote phase as people?
I I live on a farm pretty much alone with my family, and that's kind of the way I like it. But I consider everything that comes from my rectangle, my computer or my phone, and Twitter's the only outlet that I have that connects to the rest of reality. I mean, I spend my life in books and on a farm, so I consider everything as part of that consensus reality. And now there may be like my Twitter feed is smattered with all kinds of different reality tunnels, but I can from a 10,000 foot perspective back off and say, okay, of course he would think that because, and then insert the reason, and of course she would think that because insert the reason. So it makes for a great perspective in the way of keeping things distant, and but it doesn't make for good conversation with those people. Have you thought about seeing it another way? What? Sorry, didn't mean to offend.
Right. Hey, just checking. Oh, that's
Or
so
like
funny.
I have friends, and I'll tell them, well, if you had a different set of information, if you went through a different set of life experiences, then you would have a completely different opinion.
Hmm.
And it's I think a lot of people are too far gone for that, but oh well.
I think so too. I don't think people listening to this show are, though. This is really good, and this is a great way to check in.
I do like the idea of finding the others.
Yeah, yeah, man. Yeah, it's awesome. It's kind of surreal. But yeah, just being able to step back enough and see that another person could see life a different way based on all those experiences. I mean, just a very basic. You've been watching Fox News all week, versus somebody who, I guess, listens to NPR, sure, whatever, and then they get together and the conversation is just it's not gonna probably go very well. It's gonna be weaponized because they're just mostly gonna be spouting off opinions that they heard from somewhere else. These aren't necessarily their own thoughts; they're parroted, and just that simple example. But I mean, let's go even bigger than that, right? Like, you were born somewhere on the other side of the world. From me, and you grew up on a farm, whereas I grew up in the city. Every single one of those differences is going to affect that person's perspective of the world. Now, once they step back and start to understand that they can sort of create their own worldview, their own reality tunnel, then things change a lot. But when we're speaking with people, and I think this is a great segue for this, but when we're speaking with people and we already know, right? Like, just today, I was talking to somebody and I was saying, hey, let's go here, do this. And I didn't even suggest it, but the thing was, I'm not wearing a mask, right? And I'm like, okay, that's fine. We didn't get there yet, but it was already being being a thing that was thrown out, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it's just what that person's probably been exposed to some specific type of media or even their own ideas, whatever. It doesn't matter, and I respect it. I have no problem with that. The point is just that simply they're they are just their reality tunnel is just simply different. So how do we speak with people who who you say, hey, like, would you be willing to see it a different way? Probably not. But what's how can we try at least?
Well, I think starting, I don't think if you come at the situation as trying to change somebody's version of reality or change their mind, um, your people are already not, they don't want to do that. So they're going to be on the defensive. And so the goal really isn't to change their mind, but to use specific words and phrases that lead them to question your certitude in things, and and perhaps their own. So one of the things that I like to use is to me. So I have like this soup is hot to me. Adding that little bit, and I've noticed it with my kids too. They'll say, "Oh yeah, that soup's hot to me." Well, it's not to me. It it creates the idea of within reality that things are not one way. I was just in suburbia about an hour ago, and I believe that all of these people feel that this is the way reality is, and this is the way reality will continue to be. And by saying things are and things are and are not, like Robert Anton Wilson talked about, your um, you're sectioning off parts of the world. So by using phrases like "to me," or I can't think of another phrase right now, but coming at the conversation,
my opinion.
yeah, it can coming at the conversation in a way of, "Hey, I'm here to learn from you, and here are the things that I think about it, but you don't have to agree with any of this." And I usually end my conversations with, "But none of that matters." I really like to give people the opportunity to dismiss any beliefs that I have, because I'm an anarchist. But and I love what you said in some podcast a while back. You said, "I'm an anarchist. I'm an anarchist because I can be," and
Yeah.
that hit home. But I mean, I tend towards anarchism and non-aggression principle, but I could be wrong about that. That may be a terrible way of um, unorganizing society or unorganizing the world. But by saying, "Hey, this is my perception, but it's probably wrong," I'm not sure. And usually I come in with a lot more information and substance, so I appear, and it is illusion, that I appear smarter than that person. And I say, but just because I appear smarter doesn't mean I'm right or I have any grounding in anything that you're talking about, right? You have a completely different set of information than I do. So maybe together we can understand things, but if we can meet, that would be a requirement. Um, I love language, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What? Yeah, it's tough. No, but I think that's really, really, really good. And just keeping that in mind. Like, there's a book called Nonviolent Communication that I read a few years ago, and it's helpful. It talks about I language. When we're talking to people, just talking about like how you feel and what your perception is, as opposed to accusing them or saying you this or that. Also, determinate language of this is this way and yada yada yada. And I tend to agree with you too on like the non-aggression principle and that sort of philosophy. And that's also something that I've stepped back from too to reevaluate, in lieu of recent events at Chaz and stuff. Not that that's any model of how I think that world could begin to form, because I don't think it is that way. I don't think that would be the right way to enter into something like that. But also, it would require people to understand the non-aggression principle. And I saw somebody else's tweet the other day that was pretty funny. I think it was on like a libertarian account or something. And it's like, all that's required is non-aggression, which clearly 95% of people can't do, which is kind of funny. But I don't think people are taught, not to get into this bunny trail, but I don't think people are taught that. If you were taught from a young age that the aggressor in the situation was in the wrong, then I think society would look a lot different, period.
I still think you'd have the conflict if you teach somebody that the other is wrong. If
Yeah.
if this if you have bad guys and good guys in a story, it makes for a great story. But then then you live out this idea that there are good guys and bad guys, and you're just living by stereotypes. So the kind of still on that bunny trail of anarchy, what I ask of people when they do, well, what would you like to see? I say I would like for you to respect people opting out, like whatever that looks like. Just make one step toward acknowledging that people who don't want to be part of that system can exist. Because I live out on a farm on my own, and I still have to pay for a vehicle that I already paid for, and if I don't, I can get kidnapped and thrown in a cage. I mean, can we do without that? Like, what's one step that we could take toward understanding that people who don't want to be part of it can drop out? and we're all cool with it, and we're accepting of them. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean that would be pretty easy. So as we get back down into your paper here, your kind of conclusion, I thought it was really, really, really good. You know, you're talking about like, so what? So what does all this mean, right? We've got these reality tunnels. We're starting to understand kind of how they're built, and that we can, as individuals, choose how we view the world, and what that's going to look like, as well as the story that we tell ourselves about, like, are there good guys and bad guys? Am I the protagonist in my story? Everybody has different views about themselves and the world around them. So how do we, relate this, and how do we use this to our advantage in society? And your first paragraph, you start to talk about, how we hear all the news and things like that. And then there's a really good quote at the end. I think it's as if someone studied propaganda techniques and magic, then weaponized them to manufacture reality and alter mindsets. It is as if that because, again, back to the person who's just been listening to, a specific news source or something like that. Like we're agreeing upon some things that somebody's saying from far, far away. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But as soon as we bring it into our world and into our reality tunnel, it seems true to us, and we act as if it is true.
Yeah, my thoughts go to I've been deployed twice for the American military, and I remember watching their state media, whatever that was, and looking back on that now, I was being fed information that was pro-war, pro-U.S., pro-occupation, and then anti pick the bad guy at the time, and so yeah, by receiving different types of reality. By receiving different types of information, you can get sucked into those stories. And now I see them. Oh yeah, so the last part of that paper was dealing with inside the fourth layer of the reality tunnel, that story, that narrative that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. And so when we log onto our computers and we receive the truth about the world, then we're receiving a very small set of information. And so all that information is curated into a narrative. And I know you're kind of hip to Q, so you can understand that it's structured in a way to continue a story, to continue with a general belief about things, whether it's Trump is a bad guy or Trump is hated by the media, a deep state media, right? To use those two examples. You have those as the underlying tones, and then you create a structure around that. And so the problem that I see, not problem, well, I call it an opportunity. That's another way you can alter your perception, is instead of saying problem, say it's an opportunity. So you have all of this information coming in, and you're listening to the stories, but you don't know which one is real. I really do think we're in a post-truth world where it doesn't matter what's true, it's what we can convince people to do and believe. Well, convince mm-hmm. people to believe, and from their beliefs, their actions will emerge. And so when we're receiving all this information that conflicts with the other side, how do we get along with that? And I proposed 3 solutions in the paper. And the first one was a turn on, which you kind of open yourself up to everything. You say, all right, I'm cool with any reality tunnel. I'm going to go down every rabbit hole I can, try to understand things just from maybe an anthropological perspective or a socio-political perspective, or however you want, whichever filter that gets you going. But learn is basically the first one. Turn on to all the different types of reality tunnels. And then the second one is tune in, where if what we're doing right now is receiving stories from our rectangles, then we can kind of choose which one we want, whether it's true or not, because we don't know what's true. So pick the one that kind of fits your purpose, your personal purpose. I'm into philosophy and learning how to farm and communication, stuff like that. So my reality tunnel is peppered with all this information that seems useless to everybody else, but I sure do enjoy it. So it's the narrowing of your reality tunnel by filtering the information that you bring in and kind of cutting out all the rest. And I think what we're seeing is people have already done that. And I'm not listening to the fake news, or I don't listen to that right wing garbage. That's what's being done. You're just tuning out the things that you don't want to hear. And so if other people are doing that and we're still here, and you can do that, but with a positive intention, as opposed to those other people over there are doing this, then why not? So my second suggestion is to drop out of the realities that you don't want to hear. And then the third one is to drop out, and that's to just turn it all off. There's a great article by Gene Youngblood called Secession from the Broadcast. And it's where he lays out all the arguments that he has for not participating at all in the information economy, where you don't add anything to it and you don't take anything from it. Because if all this information is false or not true enough or skewed, and it leads in a direction of more bullshit, well, opt out of the bullshit and just read books, be a monk, and do something like that. And I don't think that's too. I don't think it's too much of an ask when you see what's going on from kind of a 10,000 foot perspective, where things are gonna get it, like the momentum that we've built so far with these social narratives is not going to stop. It's going to keep on building, and the reality tunnels are going to get more weaponized. You're going to have people saying that the sky is red, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So in order to put an end to that in your own personal life, because you're only here for so many days, and I think that's a great grounding point, is your own personal life. Filter out filter out everything if you want, or filter out none of it, which is the first one I talked about, and then, or filter out some of it, But I think it doesn't matter. I'm not proposing any solutions. I'm saying that these are, by thinking in this way, then you can be more aware about what's going on in the world. And that was Robert Anton Wilson's thing too. He's like, this isn't real. I'm just making this up. And just like the reality tunnels, I just made that up. It's not real. But when you engage in it, engage with it, and you start to believe that all things are believable within the right system, then it kind of opens your eyes to, or opens your mind to understanding a different way of thinking. But then I do warn people that you just can't stop it though. But what else are we gonna do?
But I'm just gonna repeat this back. So turn on, learn, follow your own curiosity in this opportunity that we have. Start there, and I think that's great anyway. Just the idea of a liberal education, right? Like the idea that you should follow whatever it is that you're most curious and passionate about. Like that's how you find your passion and really start to, I think, be a more authentic version of who you can be. Tune in, narrowing down the reality tunnel. Like you were saying, you read a lot of philosophy books and things like that, as well as farming, and I think that's amazing. You're definitely leading by example by being on a farm, and I think you're doing it right. I've said so many. I'm like, I don't want a garden. I used to work on a tree farm. I'm like, I don't want a garden, but like at the same time, man, like I think we would be in a lot different position if more of us were more self-reliant. But the third thing is to drop out, secede from the broadcast, and in your paper you talk about if we do have free will, which that's still sort of up in the air. I go half and half with that. Then we can use our intention, and that's kind of how we shape our views of the world, as well as how we create sort of new realities. But if we detached from a system that was, let's say, negative, not necessarily even negative, but something that's unhealthy for us as a species, and then created our own systems outside of that were better, then that would be a really positive use of our attention. and a great way to break the sort of trap.
Yeah, I think looking forward using this model of reality tunnel and finding the others. I think that these systems that are currently in place and you're seeing fall apart, I think these systems are ending, and they'll transform into something else, which I'm really excited about. And hopefully, secession, like individual, like not even binary, just respecting that other people want to drop out. That might be part of it. How cool! So we're gonna take these, and the only way. There we go. I found my thought. If what we're going to experience is a transition in narrative, then to build solutions you have to do it outside of the narrative. You can't do it within the linguistic constructs or within the hierarchical foundations that this thing is all set, where the one person is above another. And so I just consider them all doomed, but not in a bad way. I mean, everybody's doomed. So I just see them ending. And if you're not comfortable with that ending, then you're not comfortable. But but I'm not creating realities within that construct, and especially by not having the conversation, not having the conversation.
Yeah, no, I love it, dude. That's great. Well, I'm so excited to read your book, and like you did a great job with this paper. Like I said, it was really concise and thought provoking, and also, relatively dense, but it's something that I think people are going to really enjoy, especially after this conversation. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it again, because there's some really, really good stuff in here, and some allusions to Zen and Terence McKenna, and just so many different great thinkers in such a short document. And this is going to be available for Raw Day 2020. We love Uncle Bob, Robert Anton Wilson, folks. If you don't know who he is, I highly recommend going on YouTube and typing in Robert Anton Wilson, 8th Circuit Model of Consciousness. I think that's a great spot to begin, or reading Prometheus Rising or any of his other works. I think Prometheus Rising was my favorite one.
Mine too.
Well, there you go. Great minds. And big thanks to Dr. Richard Waterloo. Man, I'm excited to hear about you and your situation. And it's been nice chatting on Twitter, and it's been fantastic talking today.
Excellent, man. Glad to talk to you. Glad to find the others.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. I really appreciate it. This is a mind-blowing conversation, and I absolutely loved having it, folks. Go check out Dr. Richard Waterloo. He's on Twitter. And I will find a link for the paper that he has written for Raw Day 2020, and I will post that in the show notes. That was published on 7/23. It's always a 23 with Robert Anton Wilson, isn't it?
It is. I got stuck in that loop for a bit. Still stuck. It's a fun loop.
Yeah, that's an
the
interesting
thinker thinks
one.
and the prover proves.
Yeah, that's right. Dude, that's awesome. Well, thanks again, Rich, man. I really appreciate it. And folks, go check out Rich on Twitter again, Dr. Richard Waterloo. That's all spelled out. And like I said, I'll have a link in the show notes. What the thinker thinks, the prover proves. Words to live by right there. Hey, thanks everybody, especially you Patreon folks. I really appreciate it. See y'all next time.